Okay, we're ready to go here. So welcome everybody to this peace session number 7. This is an exciting one, exploring solutions for unity and justice. And I have a nickname for this session, which I'm calling the evolution of light. And you'll see why in a little moment. I got a thumbs up from Charles, so that's a good start already. So this is really exciting to me because if you look at the peace guide, which we're going to just look at here briefly, share the screen and the peace guide, you'll see that we are over here at phase 4, exploring solutions for unity and justice. So we have come a long ways, and to me, the whole idea of creating peace is that you are going to enable somebody to move past the story. Mm-hmm. This is where they get stuck, they get past the story. But with all of your love, you're being a detached observer, but loving, listening with compassion. They're getting the feelings out, or you expressing unconditional positive regard, loving speech, all of that.
You do have all of this memorized, right?
Yeah. All of that leads to the moment where you can explore solutions for unity and justice.
You know, I was telling Scott this week, I don't think a lot of people get around to, after they apologize, it's over, right? How many people really, unless you're a policymaker or some administrator or something where it's business or organizational thing, how many people really explore solutions to unity and justice? I think that's a really high-powered thing to do.
It is. And the thing about when you have conflict that you're involved in, or within yourself, or you're with other people, it can be very frustrating because it seems like the majority of your time you're in the conflict. Like, how do you get past the conflict, past the story, regurgitating itself? And sometimes as a peace master, you can get lost because you forget that there's a peace process going on because it doesn't look like peace. So that's where I want to introduce the idea of the evolution of light, that I believe when you absorb this concept, it helps you maintain a sense of being at peace yourself, and also gets you to see what's going on in the larger picture, because the issue is time. And when you look at time in a crunchy short version, it doesn't look like peace a lot. But when you look at time in a longer stretch, you then begin to see the evolution of light. Now, I'd like to give you some examples to show you what I mean by this. So the first example is, let's start with the beginning of the United States, the Revolutionary War and the War of Independence, which it lasted 8 years. So imagine if you were here in the United States at the beginning or the middle of those 8 years. It would not look like peace, would it?
No.
It would just look just the opposite of that.
Chaos.
Here you're trying to break away from a major country and form your own country. So let me ask you a question. Do you think that the United States will ever return to being a British subject? Well, no, you don't. And why don't you? And listen to this, because our consciousness has evolved too far in the light to ever go back to that place.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So that's looking at this event as a peace master. You're seeing not just did we have peace, but we had an evolution of light, an evolution of peace that took us higher, and we're not going to go back. So, and note too, that our enemy then, England, is now our closest ally in the world. So that again shows you the nature of the peace process and the evolution of light. This resulted, of course, in our Declaration of Independence as a country. A lot of peace mastery words in that Declaration of Independence, including among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I learned something in preparing for this class today, that the Pledge of Allegiance, which Congress passed in 1942, which I didn't even realize that, which goes, I pledge allegiance to the United States, one nation, there's the word unity, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There's the peace masters of the world talking, exploring solutions for unity and justice. So that's how it begins. Now, have we achieved unity and justice for all? We're still in that peace process, but we've come a long ways. And I'm going to give you another example to show you how far we've come in the evolution of light, which gives you hope as a peace master. Think of the Civil War. My best friend, Bob Griswold, you're going to hear from him later on in this session, but he loves the Civil War history. But can you imagine being alive during the Civil War? Just kind of place yourself back then, whether it's in the North or the South, and think what you would be experiencing. Just chaos and anger and fighting and death and just the opposite of peace. It would not look like peace. So what if you were a peace master right there at that time? What would you be thinking? I believe you would be needing to hold on to the concept that the evolution of light was taking place. It's a lot easier to see it in hindsight than it is to see it in foresight. But when you see it enough in hindsight, it then gives you the capacity to see it in foresight. So the Civil War ended slavery in the United States. Do you think that the United States is ever going to reinstitute slavery? No, of course not. And why? Why is that answer so easy, that question so easy to answer? Because our consciousness has evolved too far in the light to go back on that. That's the evolution of peace. And the Civil War produced a United States. There we are again. We say, I'm from the United States, or wherever you are watching this. We're grateful that people all over the world are participating in this peace course. But here, Shannon and I are living in the United States. So there's the words of a peace master. United States. Doesn't feel like it a lot of the times. May not feel like it even now for many people. But that's the words of a peace master. So do you think, despite what you may think of the status of the United States, do you think that any state is going to leave the United States and form its own country?
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. But why is that not going to happen? Because we see that the history of light, the evolution of light, the evolution of peace is on the side of unity and justice. So we can go on with examples, and I am going to go on because I do want you to see, as a peace master, I want you to see this, that it's not just a random example. This evolution of light is a constant, and that's exciting to know that the evolution of light going upwards is a constant, not a random thing. So after the Civil War, what came along next? Well, we had the 19th Amendment. And to any of you a lot of people may not know, well, I have no idea what the 19th Amendment is to our Constitution, but it is the amendment that gave women the right to vote. Now, here's a question. Do you think that if I told you that the news this morning on CNN was that the United States is considering disbanding the 19th Amendment and taking away the right to vote for women? Would you believe that? Of course not, because why? We have evolved too high in consciousness, evolved in light to ever go back on that gender equality. So, but how would you have felt if you were a woman, or many of the men supporting women, during the 97 years that women did not have the right to vote? That's a long time to not have the fruition of what you've been working for. So it's really important, and there's many of you know the history of what so many women did, and supported by men, to bring forth this 19th Amendment. But imagine how they felt during all those years of not having a voice, not having a voice literally, not having a vote or being listened to. I can't imagine. And yet they never lost hope that it would happen. And that to me is the secret of a peacemaster. You don't lose hope because you know that as a peacemaster, you are on the side of the evolution of light. You are on the path of the evolution of light. So your victory is guaranteed, just maybe not as fast as you'd like. But that's the beauty and the challenge to you in your consciousness to understand this sweeping clarity that you can look at peace as the evolution of light. All right, so then along comes World War II. That doesn't look like the evolution of light, does it? Well, out of the greatest darkness, the light continues to evolve. And when you look today at what we did, there was a World War II and Nazi Germany was defeated and Japan attacked the United States. Now, let me ask you, who are two of our staunchest allies today in the world? Germany, who just came to visit us, and Japan, our staunchest allies. So you wouldn't have ever thought that if you had said to somebody during those years, well, guess what? Germany is going to be our staunchest ally. So is Japan, by the way. You know, people wouldn't have believed you. But you could have predicted that based on the evolution of light. So bear that in mind as you think of things today that don't seem solvable. You can predict where things are going to go based on the evolution of light, even from when there seems to be great darkness. The power of peacemasters, not the power so much as the presence of peacemasters, they've been present during all of these conflicts. You don't hear about them because remember what the news generally goes by the assumption that if it bleeds, it leads. Meaning if there's violence, it goes on page one. If there's anything that is about peace, it probably won't go in the newspaper or it'll go at the very end. So one of those examples is the United Nations. How often do you see anything about the United Nations in the news? It's like you hear about all the violence, you hear the latest conflicts, but you don't hear about the United Nations, which was established after World War II, 1945. And today, 193 nations belong. Almost everybody on earth belongs to the United Nations. And they have peacekeepers. Guess how many around the world? Almost 200,000. Right now, deployed as I'm talking to you, and in 16 countries with their role to maintain the peace. So we have high-level peacemakers, peacemasters at work in the world right now. And we don't see it on the news. So this is another thing. As a peacemaster, remember all this is going on, that you're on the side of a force that is incredibly strong. Even the United Nations has passed something called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which most people have probably never heard of. The United States took a long time to even ratify it ourselves and to join others that did. However, there's many people who believe that the rights which are articulated there are the rights to which all human beings are universally and inherently entitled. It's an amazing document that we hear nothing about. But the peacemasters of history have been at work, and they have been at work in all of these conflicts. They've been at work in the present conflicts, developing the ideas that add light upon light upon light upon light. So you might say, well, what's one last example that might be more recent would be the LGBT movement in the United States. I mean, think back 20 years and what the status was of gays, lesbians. They were so unaccepted and spoke of harshly. But here's the interesting thing. It turns out there were gays and lesbians in Republican households and in Democratic households. And look at the speed at which the adoption of their right to have a fulfilled life is and equality has surfaced in our country extremely rapidly. And do you think we'll ever go back on that as a nation or as a nation? No, we won't. And why can we say that with such authority? And you know the answer by now, because we've evolved too far in our consciousness to ever go back. That's the evolution of light. So we see that in all these examples, in the present moment, things can look tumultuous, disruptive, and agonizingly slow. But the outcome of peace is more light. So the real question, I think, for a peacemaster is, how do we survive in real time? How do we survive when there's division in our face almost daily? Even though we know the evolution of light is taking place, what about today and the conflict that's in our face today? So I'm going to ask Bob Griswold to join me in this conference. And Bob, are you there?
I am here.
So here's the question. Bob and I have been business partners for 20 years. That's longer than most marriages last. And and here's the interesting thing. I'm going to reveal a little bit of stuff that's a little bit personal. I happen to be a staunch Democrat. Bob happens to be a staunch Republican. And yet we've been harmonious business partners for these 20 years. And I'd like to ask you, Bob, how do you account for that?
Well, first of all, Scott has stopped calling me an anarchist, which has really helped a lot since he's done that. But we've been through, from Bill Clinton to Donald Trump and everything in between, and there are plenty of opportunities for the other person to go, did you see what your president did last night? And keep score, but we just don't. And we don't let me speak for myself. I don't, because first of all, I have a great respect for Scott's well thought out point of view. I may disagree, but I always know he's going to have a well-reasoned, thought out point of view that will make sense to me to some degree. And so I understand that. And the other thing is just we both take a long-term view. We both recognize that it's more important to have a personal relationship and a long-term business relationship than having scoring points and kind of going the other route. So it's that long-term point of view that's very important to both of us. Of course, when I look at the conflict between Republican and Democrat, it's easier for me to say, you know, ultimately, I know they all have the same goal in mind. Everyone wants a prosperous country, a free country, a safe place, equality of opportunity. So when I realize that, it comes down to seeing people, we all have a different way of getting there or a different system of getting there. So it's really not about so much the goal, it's always about the system. And the other hot button for most people is religion. We're kind of aligned on that one, but we all have family members who come from different religions. But I look at it, all churches have the same goal of, or everyone has the same goal of finding a way to be comfortable and have a relationship with God. Churches just have a different platform for getting them there. So when I realize that, it makes it easier to understand. But I think ultimately it all comes down to kindness and making people present in your company. We've all sat at family Thanksgiving dinners, and there's always someone who wants to be controversial, wants to stir the pot, but it's sort of, and their attitude is, this is who I am, this is the way I am, I'm not changing anything, like me or, you know, or don't. Well, a lot of people choose to don't. So I tend to take the kind route and try to do what makes people comfortable that I'm around.
Yeah, that's beautifully stated, Bob. Thank you so much. I have to say, I want to add that Bob's humor has created so much unity for during our times together. I think of Bob's humor is fast and rapid and there at all times. And it's very much like the Dalai Lama, who I don't know why he can be so happy. I really don't, but the guy is always happy. And it's interesting, Bob, what you said about kindness, because the Dalai Lama once was asked, what is his religion? He says, my religion is kindness. So I think you've really I appreciate what you've shared, Bob, because this is so important for us to realize. And even in today, when we're trying to create peace, there's a difference between trying to win an argument. We all have facts, and they turned out to be sort of biased facts because they're facts that support our case. I'm not going to use facts that don't support my case. So we have to be alert as a peace master to, well, let's gather the facts in a detached way. And I must admit, sometimes I listen to Bob, I'll have the courage to ask him, say, so what do you think about this issue? What's your reasoning? And I listen to his reasoning and I think, well, that's very intelligent. I never would have even thought that, because I'm taking the time to actually live these principles of listening with compassion, being a loving and detached observer. And I learned something from that because I'm not in a defensive posture of, okay, I'm not really listening to you because I want to have a chance to tell you why you're an idiot and why you're wrong as soon as you stop talking.
I've never heard Scott say that, Bob. Never.
So it's interesting as a peace master, the more you listen to people, the more you understand what it's like to be in their footsteps. So I know you have a lot to share.
That's really exciting. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. I've loved y'all's relationship all these years. It's a model of peace mastery. I mean, these two guys are both all about creating peace, and they have so much opportunity in real estate
That's true.
to do that, plus with the partnership. The odds are against a partnership going that long, and not just the length, but it's been a beautiful partnership. We've gotten closer. We just took a weekend together with Bob's wife, Sharon, and had a blast. I mean, we're really a close group here.
We went out to see the wildflowers in Borrego Springs. And Bob was saying when we got back, we were near a house and we saw some wildflowers. And we didn't have to drive 2 hours to that. They're right here.
Well, I love what what Bob said too, because such a good example of creating peace endings that are just, because he's taking this broader view using kindness. And look, we got a lot of comments. Do you want to? Oh, look at this, Benjamin Franklin. So Charles wrote a quote from Benjamin Franklin. Why don't you read that?
The destiny of the United States of America is not power, but light. Well, geez, Mark, how come I didn't know that? That's wonderful.
Charles did that.
Thank you, Charles. Thank God for Eleanor Roosevelt's legacy and contributions to the UN Declaration of Human Rights.
I didn't know that she did that.
And thank you, Bob and Scott, for sharing how beautifully you both practice the life skills of being love and peace and light masters.
That's right.
It's wonderful.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Charles. So, you know, I always have to tell a personal story, right? Well, half an hour ago, I was at the ER with my dad, and I just came in and put on some makeup. I hadn't even had breakfast this morning and sat down. I didn't want to miss this. It's just so important to me to be here at this particular peace skill class. I love hearing what Scott said. It's so original. I've never heard anybody talk like that about peace. In fact, Scott and I spent an entire day where a really big leader in the marketing community brought a lot of people in who he admired or felt had something to contribute into a big fancy, you know, I think it was the Four Seasons or something, few years ago, to spend all day in order to discuss one subject, and that is the subject of peace. And can you define it without a negation, like it's not war? You know, how can you define peace? And really, ever since that day, it's made me very aware that peace is very elusive. I mean, it's hard to catch. It's intangible. It's invisible. It's, you know, we don't talk about these marks of peace that Scott's just named today that are marks of light. This is the evolution of our consciousness, the evolution of light. This has everything to do with peace. I think it's fabulous news. I just think it's a real epiphany that you came up with that. And I'm really enjoying that a lot.
Well, it looks like I didn't come up with it. Charles keeps coming up with these quotes that show that other people were. I'm just...
Well, you had a unique way of doing it. So anyway, you know, the last election, after the votes were tabulated, I was absolutely in shock how it ended. And what I was learning by the hour is that our country is deeply divided. I didn't know it was so divided. I thought, oh my gosh, I've not been taking that into account. When I do business people, see people, it's like, well, half of the people I talk to every day are of a very different mindset than I am politically and deeply, as much as I am. And it was a wake up for me. I had to start taking into consideration the huge differences. I had to do a lot of adjusting. Well, at the same time, my fear and my anxiety were running very high with the new president. And I didn't even feel safe for early weeks. I questioned the safety. I was praying so much for the country and the world and our safety. And it really put me into a new place, and I want to share some of that. I could see that something was collapsing and that it was something bigger than an election was taking place, something bigger than a movement. I think that, you know, I thought, well, do I have to just become more tolerant? And as I kept questioning and asking and praying and probing and making great efforts to meet this at a higher level, I came to the understanding that perhaps the realization, the real thing that's happening is that we're all being called a little bit higher. And whether your guy got in or not, elected, is not the subject. The subject is that more than anything else, we are in the midst of a quantum shift of consciousness. and it looks pretty chaotic. But we're making a huge stride right now, and it's not easy. And in fact, it's calling us into becoming transcendent, the transcendent person. That's what we're being called into right now. I perceive that the biggest problem, the major problem, is the belief of separation. And that comes from fear. It's just fear-based. And ultimately, fear is the only problem. So transcendence provides a quantum opening for us to rise above the fear. And it comes through, and the fear, which comes through feeling that we're all separated and divided. And, we hear it on the news every day, and we're reminded of it constantly. Which means we're threatened by change, right? Oh my gosh, we're all so different. And we're changing, and Congress is changing, and everything's changing. So the transcendent person will connect all things on earth. That's who will create the new earth through the greater light, presently unseen, but definitely merging. Our objective is to bring the invisible and unseen, peace, divinity, into the visible and seen, right here on earth, right here every day, just like Bob and Scott are doing every day, bringing that which is invisible, that peace, into that light, into the 3D experience in a very big way. It's quiet. It's powerful. I've watched the power of this for 20 years. It's gorgeous. I'm a huge admirer of theirs. Back in the 90s, I attended Harvard conference on spirituality and healing and medicine. It was in LA for a few days. And all the great MDs, and many of them had PhDs as well, had spoken what they feel about the mind and the body connection. I thought it was very elevating. And one of their people, are we still visible here? Okay. One of one of their top psychiatrists at Harvard came up to this huge, they made it all dark and dramatic. There were thousands of mostly doctors there and healers like myself, but used a light pointer, and up came on the slide a beautiful picture of the Sistine Chapel, the one that Michelangelo painted. And Scott's going to bring this up right now. Here it is. Maybe some of you have seen it. This is Michelangelo's masterpiece, many feet up above the floor. And he pointed to, let me have this just a second. With his light pointer, he pointed to this right here. He said, they're trying to touch, and the distance between them is what he felt created all pain and suffering on earth. This is a medical doctor who is giving the diagnosis of earth's pain, you can take it off now, is the distance, separation, simply separation between God and man. I thought it was very far-reaching. There's a mythology, it's ancient, a myth called Indra's Net, I-N-D-R-A'(S), net, N-E-T. And it's very telling. It's very high consciousness. This was back in probably before the Buddha's days, maybe about that time. But it's a picture of allness and total connectedness of all. It's a real picture of what you and I are trying to achieve. And I've never seen an image of it before, but here it is. Is that the whole image? We need the whole circle here. There you go. Okay, so this is a spiritual being, an artist rendering. And what's happening is, and this was created a long time ago, this circle is a circle of infinity, and the spiritual being is duplicated over and over and over. So it's holograms of the original. It's like one self. It's completely connected, completely interrelated, and it is a picture of wholeness. And you can see the roots everywhere, out on the out in these outer circles here. See the little roots? I think that's so cool. So Indra's net. It's a description of the one self, the one reality, and the total sum of all good. This is where we're headed. And I thought you would appreciate seeing that. You can go ahead, Scotty, thank you. Image that we can kind of hold to. You know, separation hurts our souls. Our souls are at stake here. Separation hurts the soul. The soul's origin is seamless connectedness. So it goes against the soul to be divided and separate. And for this reason alone, there's a million other reasons, but for this reason alone, we want to live in Indra's net with that image that I am the spiritual man and I am of the connectedness and the total oneness and the sum of all good. I am the one self, the one reality. Because that's what can be said about each one of us. That's the truth. That's the truth. And Joseph Campbell said of Indra's net, he loved it. The more we stay connected, the more we stay within our own wholeness. So that's at stake. If you and I are connected, and let's say we have a rift, we don't agree on something, and maybe it's a deep division. If we allow ourselves to stay connected during this division through kindness, through loving compassion, through understanding and patience, then we have maintained our wholeness. That is a formula. That's fact. That's just, I love it. How can you stay in your wholeness? Your body's going to love this. The body wants to be whole. The holistic body, where everything, all the plumbing's working, all the functioning's working, all the happy blood flowing, every part, every cell of your being loves wholeness and hungers and thirsts for it. Every part of your life hungers and thirsts for wholeness. Wholeness is what we seek. Then we feel connected, and we won't feel alone or lonely or unloved. So in our connectedness, not only we are full of light, which evolves into peace, but all humans deserve love, compassion, kindness, consideration, dignity, forgiveness, shared humanity, and caring help from each other. That's where we're coming from, guys, right? We know you. It's the one self operating. That's what we signed up for, and that's what we're doing here. And that's what Scott and I are talking about today. This is a supreme privilege to be able to share this kind of message. It's just such a message of beauty and power and inspiration and hope and light and peace. This is the big message. This is the quantum shift. This is where we are. We're not heading there, we're there. And so we want to act, appropriately and call it in even more. So the transcendent view, which is what I've been describing, is a place of refuge where we can feel safe. Don't you feel safe in Indra's net, in this idea? And we can feel protected, we can feel assured that everything's in divine order. Once again, we remind our consciousness, yes, I can trust this. This is my refuge. Everything truly is in divine order. How could it be out of order? This is the absolute of which I'm speaking. It's not the relative. You might not see a lot of evidence everywhere. The transcendent man reaches high for the higher view.
And the transcendent woman.
Yeah. The transcendent person. I wrote back to Charles from an email this week and I said, amen. He said something. I didn't have time to write, I love it. It's so great. I just said, amen. And he wrote back, women. I never thought of that. That's great. So, so there are markers for us of world peace as well as national peace, and as well as individual peace in our relationships, whether it's our spouse, our sister, brothers, our children, our grandparents and mothers and dads, our bosses, the person at the grocery store. The marker for peace is mutual consideration, very similar to what Bob was talking about, this kindness, mutual consideration, equality. That means I think you're just as deserving as I am. That's what equal is. Justice. That means we're always looking for what is fair, not just for ourselves, but the other person too. We want, and this is what peaceful endings are all about. The going to the justice is all about what is just for you and what is also just for me. We don't want to leave ourselves out, but we don't want to leave the other guy out either. So it's a new way of thinking. It's a connected way of thinking. It's a holistic way of thinking in a situation of conflict, because now we're rising so that both of us win. Both of us win justice in the end, so that something fair, something respectful, something wonderful that we're expecting in a solution to peace is what we're holding place for, and it's arriving through our holding space for it. It flows in our veins. Hey, this is chi. This is prana. This is natural to us. Now we're allowing it to flow. We're allowing it to come into the relationships. We're allowing it, especially in conflict, because that's when you lose out. That's when the separation, the division, the horrible stuff happens. Now we have a way to go forward during conflict by remembering, as Scott is calling this, the most important peace skill of all, coming up with endings which are just and fair for all. Exactly what is this peace skill?
Exploring solutions for unity and justice.
Yeah, and that's even better. Exploring solutions. I think it's fantastic.
And it's interesting because that doesn't mean arriving at solutions.
Yeah.
Or legislating them or enacting them. It just means exploring them.
Yeah.
And that can take a long time when people are stuck in their story. And frankly, you might be so tired of hearing their story that you almost want to give up being a peace master and say, okay, just have your story. I've got to take a break. Or yourself, you realize how lost you are in your own story. You'll know that when you're tired, when you start telling your story again, and you're tired yourself of hearing it. So this is an opportunity to explore just gently, because with all that love and compassion that you've put in, just like when Bob is putting in all those beautiful qualities of grace that he expresses, that creates an environment then that I can take timid steps towards exploring political conversations with him. So we're exploring solutions for unity and justice.
Yeah.
So that's very exciting.
I just want to say that at the point in a conflict, we get worn out. Our patience wears thin. We're tired of the subject. We're sick of the same old, argument. Okay, have your way, whatever. Let it end. We kind of don't even explore those just endings that are so essential to a great relationship. And you want great relationships because you have the capability of greatness. We know who you are. So let me just say, at the end, when it's time to explore, the solutions for unity and justice, find that well of prana, of that energy, of that infinite, wonderful life force within you to claim compassionate caring for that person and for yourself, because you're going to need it. Instead of listening to the old tape of I'm worn out with this, I'm done, I want to walk out, I can't handle it anymore. You want to stop and you want to open the gates with patience, with compassionate caring, and stay for exploration of wonderful solutions. That's gorgeous. That's intimate. That's what we all live for. And that is connectedness, and that is wholeness. You want to reach that as often as possible.
And I'm going to share a video right now that supports that, because I've been so impressed with the Dalai Lama and how do you stay happy and compassionate when you've been kicked out of your country and your fellow Tibetans have suffered so much. So John Oliver of all people, had an interview with the Dalai Lama recently.
Yeah,
He
that's
did a
right.
whole segment on it. So I'm going to find that right now, hopefully, and see if I can't share that. And here he is.
Good.
Now, look at that. Look at that face.
I love that man.
I mean, he's just always smiling. He's
Yeah.
always happy. And but
he
this
laughs
is,
a lot.
and even under the worst circumstances of division. So I'm going to play this very short, just less than 2 minutes.
Let's talk about China, because the Chinese government absolutely hates you, don't they?
Yes.
Publicly, one government official said you're a wolf wrapped in monk's robes, and photos of you are forbidden in many places. You don't, to me, look like an evil wolf.
They described me as a demon.
You're a demon.
No?
Yeah.
Then I immediately reacted, yes, I'm demon with horn.
Yeah, because that's the classic demon, right?
Yes.
I think that's when they look at you, that's what they see.
Oh, whatever they want to say, that's their freedom. I have no negative feeling. I just feel a love like that. I practice, you see, taking others' anger, suspicion, distrust, and give them patience, tolerance, and compassion. I practice that.
But
So isn't that, let me just stop sharing here. Isn't that amazing? That's inspirational, because talk about somebody who is a peace master, who understands that peace is a process. If you said, well, how successful has the Dalai Lama been in getting Tibet free? Or you'd say, well, he hasn't been successful at all. But when you look at how his presence as tolerance, as patience, as compassion, and the active living of it, you just can't reach a higher mark of success than that. So he's a good role model to remember that if he can be so happy and so compassionate, we can too.
And you know, in Buddhism, everything is a practice. So this doesn't just happen. Dalai Lama wasn't just born happy. The man practices. His life is devoted by the hour to the Buddhist principles of practicing peace, tolerance, patience, compassion, caring, listening, understanding. That this is the Buddhist way, you know, letting go of attachments, letting go of grasping, letting go of fear. It's an enormous, complex practice. I've studied it for many, many years and read many, many books by monks, and I admire them enormously. And it inspires me to practice what I can too. Without the practice, golly, I mean, we have to have skills in this world, and these are the most important skills. Your peace skills are very important to you.
And
Your love skills as well.
the interesting thing is, what we need to get good at is remaining patient and tolerant and compassionate when there's stress
Yeah.
and conflict, because it's easy to do that when Shannon's smiling at me, but it's another thing to do that when there's tension and stress. But think of that. I mean, you learned how to use an iPhone or an Android. Think of all the, so
Computer.
the equal amount of energy into learning compassion and patience and tolerance and understanding. I want to give another example. My parents, my mom and dad, who are gone. Well, they're not here, let's just say.
Or they're
In
not
3D.
visible.
They're not visible. But they may be listening to this in another
I
way.
think so.
But they never knew Shannon. In fact, parents have to deal with a lot of stress and disappointment because they don't see the peace that they were seeking oftentimes when they're raising their kids. I often think that when my mom and dad passed away, they never saw me happy in a relationship. I was in the middle of one of my two bad marriages, and they never saw me at peace. Well, at least in those terms, you know. So I think of the fact, though, that they were like role models and mentors to me. And if they were observing me today, which I actually think they are, and we've talked often about how close they are to Shannon and we are to them, but they fulfilled their life mission, which I believe was boosting me into the light. I don't think there's anything they wanted more than that as parents, was to cause me to see the light, adopt the light, and grow in the light. So, and yet, you could argue they didn't see that in their lifetime. And yet they were peace masters the entire time because they held the vision. That's what parents do. They hold the vision that this person in front of them is going to grow out of whatever they're demonstrating at the moment and move into the light. And it is holding that vision with compassion and understanding and tolerance, even in those tough moments, that really causes a parent to be a peace master. So, you know, it comes back to like, okay, how do we practice? How do we get better at being a peace master in this reality where peace isn't at hand, even though it's helpful to know about the evolution of light, because that gives inspiration and hope to our consciousness. It actually gives confidence. Think of Martin Luther King, what he did not experience. And yet he could get up there and say, I have a dream. And that is the speech that has defined him and has enabled all of us to rise higher. That was part of the evolution of light. Can't look at your job as a peace master in terms of this date, this week, this month, even this year. In fact, you may not even be able to look at it in terms of this lifetime. There's much more going on.
I like what you said about peacekeepers. You know, I like to think of myself as a peacekeeper. That's a job. That's a post, you know. I like that.
Yeah. You know,
Peacemaker, I don't know. But peacekeeper, yeah, I can keep peace.
one day, Shannon and I were sitting on a blanket overlooking the ocean in Del Mar, California, close to our home, just enjoying sandwich at lunch, and all of a sudden, Sandwich said, Shannon said, yeah, Sandwich said to me, she said to me, would you like to see who I really am? I said, because we can't go anywhere without designing training programs. We do it. This is what our normal lunch is like. You know, it's like, well, and I said, well, of course I'd like to see who you are. And so she showed me. She stood up. We're in a park, maybe 50 other people, and I'm looking around, and Shannon is not self-conscious. And
I knew what I was doing.
she was having so much fun showing me who she is. And after
I had to act it out.
Yeah.
With my hands and the way I stood, and I acted it out. I'm just rushing energy. It's like a waterfall that tumbles and flows constantly. Water keeps coming. It's like a flow of constant love. I said, that's the way I feel inside. It's just huge energy of love.
I really got it too. It was very physically apparent. And then she asked me, so what's your identity signature? That's where we come up with this phrase, identity signature. Now think about this for a moment. You sign your name the same way 1 billion times, right? You may have practiced, but now you got it down, so you know exactly what your signature is. Well, imagine if you had your soul signature down just as pat as that. So it was like you're just writing it out constantly throughout the day. So we think of that as your soul signature or your identity signature. So there we were at the park, and Shannon said, so show me your identity signature. And I looked around at the park, and I thought, this is going to be so embarrassing. I can't possibly stand up here and do this. And I'm just a shy guy. So, but she said, you said something to me that
I think I said, if when are you going to be visible? I mean, if not now, when?
Yeah.
We're all hiding. You know, we got our defense mechanisms down pat, but who are you really? I mean, it's okay to shine. It's okay to be who you are, to state it, to act it out, to really enlarge on it.
Yeah, when are you going to show your soul?
This is not ego. Soul is the opposite of ego. It's the true self.
So I stood up and I had a lot of fun. I had to think about this for a while and all of a sudden I found myself, I'm going to knock you out of the picture.
Yeah,
all of a sudden I saw myself embracing everybody and then holding them and lifting them up to the light.
Yeah.
And
That's what you do all the time.
it felt so good. So
Yeah.
in our workshops, we've had, a number where there have been 20 or 30 or 40 people. We've had them all in a room demonstrating their identity signature with quiet music playing to get in touch with it. Well, who are you? And one participant, I remember Georgia, went home and she was showing her daughter her identity signature.
Mm-hmm.
And the granddaughter
6-year-old Hannah.
was watching. And after Georgia showed her identity signature, the granddaughter, not her daughter, little Hannah said, I have an identity signature. Would you like to see it? And
Precious.
it was just precious. She went around and she said, I take the bad things, the hurtful things away from people. And she
Out
said,
of you and out of
out of
you.
you and out of you.
Out of
And
your hearts.
yeah, and I give them up to the sky.
I put them up on clouds and the wind blows them away.
Yeah.
That
Now,
precious.
she knew that at 6 years old.
Mhm.
She was in touch with her soul.
Yeah.
So I find that I encourage you to explore your identity signature, your soul signature, and get in touch with it, because then as a peace master, you can be living it. If I'm in the middle of a conflict, I'm not going to be going like this and like this, to the people in front of me.
But mentally, you
But
can.
that's what I'm going to be doing within my soul. That's what, and so what happens is people feel your presence. You can learn all of these skills that we've been going over. But if you do any of these skills, like I'm going to let them get their feelings out, but you're not doing it from your soul. You're not doing it from a place of compassion. You're just saying, I know this is one of the peace skills, so I know you're angry, so go ahead and tell me what you're angry about.
Don't get your feelings out too much.
That's not going to create peace, because you're just simply going through the steps rather than in the spirit. So, and yet, creating peace can feel elusive, because how do you do that? I mean, that big conference we had, people couldn't figure out how to do it. So that's one of the things that inspired us to come up with this course and these very learnable, clear, not confusing skills. You can listen, you can help somebody get their feelings out. You can listen with compassion. You have that capacity. You can be loving but detached. You can use loving speech. You can express unconditional positive regard. You can love the person, separate them from any acts. And all of that will lead to them being able to move past their story and explore ways of forgiving and explore ways of creating unity and justice. It's exciting.
Mm.
And to have this big picture, that's the real bottom line, is the peace master never deals with the little picture, the conflict right in front of you. Like, how are we going to solve this particular issue right now? The peace master is always dealing with, there's something much, much bigger going on. It isn't the issue, it's the conflict. How do we arrive at a place of mutual compassion respect for each other. And how do we, and that's the bigger picture. That's why the Dalai Lama, he's working his peace magic in the bigger picture of being a compassionate being himself.
Yeah, present.
And not and what others say, as he said, that's up to them. It doesn't touch me. So conflict doesn't have to touch you as a peace master. It's easy to say and hard to do, but that's the whole reason that you're tuned in and listening to this, because it's good news.
This has been wonderful.
It is good news, and we're going to end with a song, and it's written by Robert Gass. May you dwell in the heart. And
This is Buddhist also.
I think
Buddhist derived.
you'll love this, and it's hard to understand, so I even have the lyrics up as well.
Good.
So here we go. May in the heart.
May I dwell in your heart. May I be free from suffering. May I be healed. May I be whole. May I be at peace. May all beings dwell in the heart. May all be free from suffering. May all beings heal in the heart. May we all be at peace. May you dwell in the heart. May you be free from suffering. May you be healed. May you be whole. May you be at peace. May all beings dwell in the heart. May all be free from suffering. May all beings heal in the heart. May we all be at peace.
So we send you much love as a peace master. Thank you for being with us.